Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here with you. I happen to have a copy of my book right here. It's coming out in September. I've been working on this for about 6 years, actually, since I finished up my doctoral dissertation at the University of Maryland. So we have that in common, Rachel. And so I'm really happy to actually, this is the first time I've ever given a talk on the topic of relationships since I've been working on the book. I've been aware of the concepts for much of my life, and it started kind of coming together again as I was putting my dissertation together. So I have a little PowerPoint that I'm going to pull up here. Let me get that going. And I'm going to try to take you through the basics of what I call Relationshift. And I'm going to play this. So Relationshift is happening to us all the time. And really, the basic idea of relationship is that we become like the people that we hang around. It's a really common principle that I think we all are well aware of. And what I realized as I studied this was that there's a lot more opportunity to make use of the principles of relationship than most of us take advantage of. And I found that if you become more conscious and aware of how you're using these principles, you can actually achieve almost any goal. You can really shape your life. You can become happier. You can get in shape. You can start a business. Whatever you dream of. In fact, even your dreams themselves can change because everything that we are came from the people in our life. So that's what I want to dig into. The topic is relationship, and we'll get started. I'll start by telling you a little bit of story about how this all started. And it started when I was a kid. I was born the son of a drug dealer and con man in LA. And it was kind of a strange childhood. Maybe it sounds like to you, but to me, it was normal. And, like I'll give you one story. When it was time to go to the county fair, rather than going in the front entrance like most people, my dad waited till it was take your kid to work day, and he dressed up like a maintenance worker, faked a name badge, and we snuck in the back gate. So that's how we went to the county fair for the first time. And the reason why I bring this up is that people have this question about, how far the apple falls from the tree. You've heard the phrase, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And so some of us become a lot like our parents, and some of us become very different. But the fact is that effect that our parents have on us has a powerful magnitude to change us and make us who we are. But not just our parents, everybody in our life, our teachers, our pastors, our mentors, our friends. And so you say, well, why would one person become more like their parent? Maybe one person becomes different. And that's the magic and very interesting factor of relationship, is it's incredibly complicated. So it's not so easy as just to say that we become like the five people that we hang out with. There's a lot of phrases like that, like you're the average of the five people that you hang out with. It's much more complicated than that. Now, for me, the reason why I bring up my childhood, one reason is that when I was a kid, I never really understood a lot of things that it seemed like other kids understood about relationships. And it took me many decades of people kind of suggesting mildly, maybe they were joking, maybe they were serious, that I could be on the spectrum for autism, and that I didn't really understand like basic things of the way that people interacted. And so what I did was I studied how people interact, and I learned to adopt those traits. And sometimes I didn't even understand them even after I adopted them, but I just noticed that that's the way that people interact. So I moved through my life learning to behave normally, what most people just learn naturally. I had to be more conscious about it, which is why I think this topic became of interest to me later in life, because I found myself emulating traits later in life. So I'll give you one example. One time I was sitting, I had met somebody at a party, and, we kind of hit it off, and invited her out to drinks, and we were getting to know each other a little bit. And she said, kind of out of the blue, she's like, man, at the party, you seem like such a fun, like nice, interesting guy, but in person, you're actually like incredibly serious. And I was kind of taken aback because I thought we were having a good, fun conversation. But I realized that there was something about my facial expressions that was not conveying what I felt on the inside. And so I started looking around and I noticed that people smile when other people are talking. And it's like a simple thing that a lot of people do naturally, but for me, it wasn't natural. So I started to try to smile a little bit more when I'm having a conversation with an employee or whatever. So it's this kind of emulation, that something that I've had to do somewhat more manually, other people do naturally. And that's what caused me to think about these things and spend so much time working on them. So fast forward, oh, by the way, here's me getting relation shifted by my mom. You can see how pleased I am to have her rubbing off on me here and changing me a little bit. So there's me as a teenager. But in my dissertation, what I became really, really interested in was that ideas spread like viruses. So for me, I was purposefully trying to catch certain viruses, but this is how all ideas transfer from one person to another. In fact, you have to have proximity to someone. And for an idea to transfer, rather than just pure physical proximity, like we've discovered with social distancing and COVID and all of that, for ideas, you need trust. And that trust is what facilitates the virus of an idea to transfer from one person to another. Now, sometimes it can transfer without trust even, but trust definitely facilitates the transfer. And that's why the people who are closest to us have the most impact on us. But ideas spread like viruses, and it might be better to use the term bacteria, because there's actually good bacteria and bad bacteria. There's actually good viruses and bad viruses too. We think mostly that viruses are bad, but there are some good viruses that we've been discovering recently in the physical realm, in the space, like in our gut, that help keep us healthy. And so the ideas are the same way, right? Some ideas that we catch are good and healthy and helpful, and some ideas that we catch are harmful to us. And sometimes we can't tell the difference. And our bodies are basically have the same function. Our immune system is designed to reject negative bacteria or viruses that are going to hurt us. But sometimes it gets it wrong and it rejects a good thing. So I'll give you an example. When you get an organ transplant, sometimes you have to take medicine to reduce your immune system response, because your immune system might think that that new organ is a danger. It doesn't recognize it, and so it wants to reject it. So we have to take a drug to reduce our immune system response. That's an example of how our body's immune system could reject a good idea. We do the same thing. One example with me is, like, let's say with counseling. I used to, think counseling was a terrible idea. And why? Because I tried it once. I didn't really like the guy that I talked to. I didn't get anything from it. So I thought, this is a waste of time. I don't see why anybody would ever do this. But I had lots of people say, hey, you should, get a counselor, check it out, try it out. So for years I didn't. Finally, I tried again, and I found somebody that I really liked, and we work through some really cool stuff. And I was like, man, for 3 or 4 years, I was rejecting the idea that counseling could be helpful to me, just like my immune system rejects helpful ideas. We do the same thing, obviously, with some harmful ideas. When people are exposed from a young age to racism or any kind of negative mentality, just negativity about life, if you're exposed to that again and again and again, people can catch that like a virus. And their immune system isn't necessarily always capable of rejecting that or understanding the difference between the good and the bad. So one of the key principles of making better use of Relationshift is learning to differentiate and learning to accept the good and helpful viruses or ideas from the people around us, and reject the ones, even from the same people, that could actually be harmful. So Relationshift is happening to us all the time. It's happening to you and me right now. Literally, this is Relationshift. You all are listening to me describe my past, and you're hearing my stories. And you have a personal lens, an immune system that's either accepting or rejecting those ideas. And that's your response based on all of the things that have happened to you up until this point. So, but I came to be really fascinated with this idea when I was doing my dissertation is, could we take better control of who we're becoming by being more intentional about how Relationshift is affecting us? And the answer is yes. You actually can take control of this process. It's going to happen to you whether you like it or not. You're going to continue to be affected by the ideas that you're bombarded with, or the ideas that you're presented with. But the question is, can you take control of that, and how? And that's what the topic of Relationship, my book, is about. And that's what I want to get into with you today. Try to give you some practical examples of how you can make use of this concept to make some changes in your life. So Relationshift is like the game PLINKO. Any of you guys ever remember that game from, was it Price is Right? The game Price is Right. So here's a PLINKO board. And in PLINKO, what you do is you take this puck and you drop it down one of these slots, and your goal is to get it into the money slot in the bottom with the most money. And you think, you have like some control over this, but in reality, it doesn't really matter where you put it. You can't really control where it falls because it hits those pegs on the way down. And because of the randomness of our universe, it bounces one way or the other. And statistically, you could look at this and you could say, there's some math that we could do to kind of calculate the probability it's going to fall in any of these different places. But in real life, it's too complicated. And what's that like? It's like it's bumping up against different pegs or different people. And we like I described to my father, he was a con man and a gambler and a drug addict. And I didn't become like that. Why didn't I? Other people in my family did become like him and are like him. And so we bumped up against pegs over the course of our life. And for some reason, I kind of went one way and some of my siblings went another. And so life is kind of like that. But Relationshift is taking control of that. But how do you take control of that? Because it seems so random. Well, here's the analogy is, what if you could take that PLINKO board and you could rotate it? So now as you're hitting those pegs, you're kind of controlling a little bit more where that puck is going to land. Can you control it perfectly? No, but you can control it a little bit. And so that is one of the key principles of Relationshift is it's not about making some massive drastic change that you can predict and you can have a perfect game plan and that you can map out from A to Z exactly how you're going to get there. But what it does mean is that you can lean in a particular direction. And when you lean in that direction, you're more likely to head in that direction. It's not a for sure thing, and it's going to be unpredictable. But you can actually, if you could take that PLINKO board and tilt it, you could have more control over where that puck goes. So that's one of the key principles of Relationshift. I want to give you two practical ways to apply Relationshift. The first is, and we're going to get into this in a little bit more detail, is that you want to lean into the relationships that are going to take you further and faster. So some relationships have the power to take you further, and some have the power to take you faster, and some don't. And where are they taking you? Well, it doesn't matter. It's whatever you want. So the idea is that you pick where you want to go. You want to be happier. You want to be richer. You want to write a book. You want to start a business. You want to have more customers. You want to have higher paying customers. Whatever your goal is, some relationships can help you achieve that faster, and they can take you further on that journey than others. So we're going to talk about that more in a second. The second one that I want to share with you is, again, that we need to learn to allow those viruses or those ideas that are helping us in, and we need to learn to reject the ones that are holding us back. So those are two key ways that we can apply Relationshift. Before we move on, I want to show you, again, to reiterate, one of the key things to keep in mind about Relationshift is you make little adjustments and it can make a big difference over time. So my analogy here is that if you make a tiny course adjustment, I live here in Seattle, you can see the city behind me. Say I set sail out from the Puget Sound and I'm heading out into the ocean. I can adjust my rudder just a tiny little bit and it'll either take me to Australia or to Tokyo. And that's the power of small changes over time. And so if you think about it, if you meet someone and you get an idea from that person that changes your thinking just a little bit, what that has is a compounding effect, because that little change might cause you to meet somebody different who gives you a different idea who causes you to meet another person who gives you another idea. And then over the course of time, your vision for what's possible in your life can completely be transformed. In fact, you could become a completely different person. Now you can look back. What's hard about this is you look back in time and you say, man, these relationships made a huge difference in my life, and I wouldn't have this job, or I wouldn't have this political view, or whatever it is. And you can look back. It's a lot more difficult looking forward, but it's important to remember how important those little changes are and how big of a difference that can make over time. So let's get into the first practical way to apply Relationshift. And that is that every relationship has the power to either take you towards a goal or pull you away from it. All relationships are affecting us in many different ways. And some people can be an incredibly positive influence in our life, but they can still have a certain thing, a certain aspect of their personality or the way that we interact with them that is negatively affecting us. So I'll give you an example. I have a friend whose mom I've come to really admire as a mentor. Wonderful woman. She's really funny. She's a hardworking person. She's successful. Everybody likes her. She's a really great woman. And there's a lot of ways that I look up to her, and I think she's a great mentor. But there's one way that I think that the way that she thinks about the life and the way that she approaches life actually is holding my friend back. And that is that she thinks that working like crazy all the time is really admirable, and maybe finding a little bit of ways to not work so hard, but work smarter and maybe work a little less. She thinks of that as kind of like not having good work ethic, right? And so because she has such a strong work ethic, I think to a fault, that rubs off on my friend. So then my friend is stressed, and she's thinking like, man, I need to be working harder. I need to be doing more, even though her boss is telling her, hey, stop answering your emails over the weekend. You're already doing enough. And so this older woman, she's a great influence in so many ways, but because of the way she approaches her work, she actually causes some stress in my friend's life. And so how do you apply this is that you accept those positive things, and you retain those and hold on to those, and you say, those are ways that I want this person to affect me positively. But you don't take the whole person and take all the negatives and the positives together. And you can separate out the negatives, and you say, you know what, in this one area, I'm not going to allow this person to influence my thinking. And maybe in that area, I'm going to find someone else. Maybe there's somebody who really embodies that trait, and they know how to work smart, not hard, and they know how to put their work away at the end of the day, and they get a ton of stuff done, and they're really successful, but they're not so stressed about getting up at 5 a.m. and working till 9 p.m, and they don't think that that's the only way to be a good contributor to society. So that's what you do, is you find different people to pull you where you want, to go. And you have to kind of curate these traits from different people. They can't all come from the same person, because there's no one person who could embody all the different kinds of things in the different ways that we want to grow. So that's one of the keys to relationships, is kind of thinking about how the relationships affect you positively and negatively. The second key is that this idea that some people can take us further and faster. And what I call this transformational gravity. So some people have more gravity. The moon, there was an eclipse the other night, which is really cool. I love to see that kind of thing in the sky. The moon has a certain amount of gravity, and that's gravity that pulls the ocean, creates the tides and all of that. If the moon was bigger, the tides would be more powerful, the waves would be bigger, right? So gravity pulls us towards it, and humans and people have that. Some people affect us more than others, and it can show itself in a lot of different ways. And so what I kind of like to think is, like, in any given trait in life, so one of those traits might be my financial status. There's where I am, and there's where I want to be. Maybe there's a certain amount of money I want to have in my bank, or a certain amount of income I want to make. And there's mentors that are further along in this path. They have more money in their bank, or they have a higher income. And if I hang out with those people and they can actually help pull me towards that goal of making a higher income. Now, maybe they're terrible parents, or they have a terrible relationship with their spouse. So I'm not going to think of them or let them pull me towards them in terms of the negative aspects of how they might be pulling me away from my goals. And by the way, let me stop and say, it's not always a moral judgment. It's not often a moral judgment. Sometimes it's just a personal thing. I want to be this, and this person isn't that. It's not moral. It's not necessarily immoral. It's just they're not on that path. They're not further along on that particular goal. Okay, so it doesn't have to be immoral or moral. But some people have the ability to take us much further. So if you think about that goal, here's an example where one mentor is a little further along than you, and another mentor is much further along than you. And that second mentor has more force or gravity to pull you forward. So let's say I want to start a business. I might have a friend who has who also wants to start a business and has it already incorporated. They've already got like their first customer and they're starting to hire some employees. Let's consider that mentor one. That person could certainly help me and they can pull me forward. But let's say, for example, I could get Elon Musk to be my mentor. Now, Elon Musk has started many businesses. He's had a lot more success in business, and he would obviously have a lot more transformational gravity. And if I wanted to start a business and I could choose between two mentors, someone who's a little further ahead of me or Elon Musk, who would be the better person to spend my time with as a mentor for starting a business? Well, obviously Elon Musk. Getting to hang around with him a little bit would make a huge difference in, my life if I want to start a business or if I want to be successful in business. Now, maybe, again, he's not the greatest at some other aspect of his life, but you set that aside and you say, this is the part about you that I want to be transformed in. And so I want to have mentors that pull me forward as far and fast as possible. Now, with all goals, this isn't necessary. It's only necessary with certain goals. In my book, I get into some specific examples. And I'm also going to deal with some kind of common objections because some of this can start to feel kind of transactional and very robotic, like I'm thinking about who I'm hanging out with in order to get the most from my relationships. And the longer I've thought about this and the longer I've worked on it, the more I've realized that that's not true at all. The opposite's true. You still want to approach your relationships with as much authenticity as possible. And you really want to lean into your relationships in a way that's rewarding for both sides and isn't transactional in the slightest bit. But you can start to, again, lean in one direction or another. And as you lean towards someone that's more like an Elon Musk who can help you grow much further and faster, they're going to help you with that goal of starting a business better. Now, maybe in another goal, it's not as big of a deal, like companionship. So if you want to have more friendship and companionship in your life, there's not really like an equivalent of an Elon Musk in that category. So maybe it's just you have some friends and family. I could think of this woman that I was mentioning, this older woman earlier. She's an example to me of someone who really loves her family and loves relationships. So she's a perfect mentor for me. And it's not so important in that category of my life to find someone who's like really far along. It's just think about the people in your life who are good at that thing. And at whatever that is, that's kind of what you want to hang out with them around. So there's also the other kinds of common objections. I'm going to get to those at the end. So, and also by all means, if you have some questions, type them in and I'll get to as many as I can when we get to the end of this. But this is the idea of transformational gravity. Some people can help you go further faster. And one of the key principles of making the most of Relationshift is hanging around with people with more gravity in the areas of your life that you want to grow in. So now you may be asking, great, it'd be wonderful if I could have Elon Musk as a mentor for starting my new business. But how am I going to get Elon Musk to spend time with me? So I have some methods that I want to pass on to you for finding and fostering relationships with high gravity individuals. The first is to create bridge connections. I'm going to go into more of that in a second. And the second is to get into their tribe. So I'm going to get into both of these into a little bit greater depth. I have up here on the screen before we move on the 7 dimensions of relationship strength. I can make this slide deck available to you after this if you don't want to take notes, or maybe you can take a screenshot. But these are 7 different ways that you can foster more strength of relationship with someone. Doing business together, time, trust, emotional connection, frequency, and quality of experiences. And you can see these here. I'll just say one thing real quick. A lot of people I talk to about relationships, they're afraid to ask people for something. They think that by asking for a help or a favor, they're going to burn a bridge with that person. But if you do it properly, in many cases, you actually are building a stronger relationship by asking for something. If you're asking for a favor, now, if all you ever do is ask for favors and you never have anything in return, obviously that could be a problem. But if you have a relationship with someone and you ask for something, you ask for a favor, it's a chance for you to do something together. It's a chance for them to help you out. And then maybe you can help them in return. And that is something that can build a longer lasting and more trusting relationship. So keep that in mind as you're building relationships with people. There's 7 dimensions that you can do that through. Now let's get into this idea of creating a bridge connection. A bridge connection is a really magical, powerful kind of connection between 2 different networks. And it's incredibly powerful because it doesn't have a lot of overlap. In my dissertation on this topic, one of the things I discovered was that we have a limited amount of time and energy to build relationships. And so it's important to build relationships with the right kinds of people, especially when we're talking about business, because we can't have a relationship with everyone. So bridge connection is a connection where you and this other person don't share a lot of the same connections. They know a lot of different kinds of people than you. And I know a lot of different kinds of people than them. And we're the common denominator. So rather than having to form a relationship with all of the people in their network, I can go through them and get access to anybody in their network. An example of this is if you want to do business with, say, high net worth individuals. Well, people that have, say, $50 million investments, they're typically pretty difficult to get a hold of. So who would be a kind of person that would have a lot of relationships with people with a lot of net worth? Well, financial advisor, CPA, attorney. There's certain people that have already built those relationships. So if you can form a strong relationship with the person at the center of that network, you've saved yourself a lot of work. That's the power of a bridge connection. And it's one of the most important ways that you can get more out of your networking is by finding the right kinds of people to really build those relationships with. And we call those power partners. Those of you who have been around networking for a long time are familiar with that term, but that's one of the key factors of relationship, is that person can help take you further and faster. So that's a bridge connection. And the other idea that I want to talk about is getting into their tribe. And so, I thought I had this kind of was thinking about, like, why is it that some people are so readily available to help us where most people aren't? I mean, if you're anything like me, you've probably asked for things from lots and lots of people over the time. You've applied to many jobs and, gotten no's, or you've asked for referrals and gotten no's, or, when I reached out to get an agent for my book, when I was first starting my writing career, I queried like 600 agents and not any of them wanted to work with me. So we're kind of used to people saying no to us more than they say yes. And I started to get interested in that idea. Like, why did people say no more than yes when you asked for help? Well, I realized it goes back to when we were first living in tribes of 50 to 100 people, 100,000 years ago. And the fact is that the people in our tribe, we relied on each other for mutual survival. If somebody was sick, everybody could get sick. If somebody couldn't go out and gather or hunt, or wasn't pulling their weight, or they needed something, the tribe, it was in their best interest to help each other. And so if you're in the tribe, it's very easy to get help. And in today's world, we have lots of modern versions of tribes. There's real tribes. There's, I was talking with some people in Kenya that were parts of tribes. So there's still geographic tribes, but I'm talking about in our brains 100,000 years ago when we were first becoming humans, we developed this concept that in today's world exists in other forms, like attending the same yoga class together, or going to the same gym, or attending the same church, or liking the same sports team. And we call capitalizing on this idea of being in someone's tribe, we use the word building rapport when we're talking about it in sales. And salespeople will sometimes come up to you and they'll see you got a Seahawks jersey on, and they'll say, the Seahawks, how they're playing this Sunday, right? And so they bring something up that you might have in common in order to make you feel like you're in the same tribe. And what happens is your walls come down and you're more likely to make a purchase with this person because you trust them. Now, on the other hand, if somebody is outside your tribe, we're more likely to say no, because when our brains were forming, we said, that's a threat. We have limited resources. We can't share with just anybody who comes along. We're focused on our tribe survival. And so the human's natural response when asked for help is no to everybody who they perceive to be outside of their tribe. Now, is this a hard and fast rule? Of course not. There's lots more nuance to it, but it's one way to think about it. And if you can find a way to get into someone's tribe, then you have a much better chance of getting help from them. And I'm going to talk about 3 quick ways to do that. The first is by being helpful. So, I don't know if any of you guys know, I know Frank, Jeff Rogers. I learned this from him. When he goes out and meets with someone for the first time, he's only focused on helping that person. He wants to give them connections or referrals. He wants to learn about them. He doesn't try to get anything from them in return. And when you're helpful like that and you become known for being helpful, people want to help you in return. It's just the way the world works. You could call it karma. You could call it just the natural tendencies. You could call, you could name it anything you want. But when you're a very helpful person, when you give first, people just naturally want to give to you back. And so that's one way that you can get into your tribe. And it's one way that you can meet really interesting, high gravity people. So you could volunteer to be on a board of directors, and now you're in the tribe and you're sitting next to a group of people that are also on the board, and maybe they're more powerful people, or they have more influence, or they have something that you're looking for more of in your life. Another one is persistence. So simply persisting and taking the time. Relationship takes decades. It happens over the course of our entire life. Again, we can look back, and I can look at certain relationships that led to really amazing progress in my life. I couldn't really predict that going forward. So the key is you just keep persisting at it. And then over the course of time, you see how it evolves. The third is readiness. So what I found is it's really important when you meet someone or you get an opportunity and you recognize them as a high gravity individual, that you're ready to take advantage of that opportunity, because they come along when we don't expect it. And they come along, I think, for all of us. And so how I apply that is when I meet someone who's a high gravity individual and I have an opportunity to work with them or meet them or do something with them, I really put a lot of effort and thought into that relationship. If I'm doing work for them, I'm going to do twice as much work and bill them half as much, just so that I can make sure I really nail that engagement, because I want a relationship with that person more than I want a couple of bucks, or more than I want to skip out of work that afternoon. So readiness is having space in your life so that when that high gravity individual comes around, you're ready to pounce on that. So those are 3 ways that you can get into somebody's tribe if you identify them as somebody that you'd like to have more of in your life. So we're getting close to the end of my presentation, and I just want to address a couple of common objections that come up. One is people ask me, how is this different than social climbing? It sounds like you're using relationships to kind of improve your place in life. And frankly, really people who are doing that, they are using relationships to do that. But that doesn't mean that you need to. Again, relationship is happening to us all the time in all directions. And so what I would say is don't use it for social climbing. Use relationship as a tool to understand how people are affecting you. And again, lean towards the people that you want to be more like. Curate those traits. If you think about, when I stand up and give a toast at dinner, I know this guy who every time he gives toasts, everybody puts their plates down and and they listen to him. And he's a very dynamic speaker. And so when I give a toast, sometimes I kind of think of that guy in my mind and I channel him and I think, there's just something about that. Like you just kind of think of the person and how they would do it. And then you try it and it becomes more natural and it becomes a part of your life. And then you get better at it. And so, yeah, you can use this to be, you can use these principles for nefarious or less than moral objectives, but you also don't have to. And again, it's happening to you whether you're controlling it or not. So what I would argue is lean in the direction you want to go and lean into authentic and natural relationships and keep investing in those relationships in the most authentic, giving way you can. And then you will watch and see how this progresses in your life and causes transformation for you in positive ways. The second objection I get is, how can I be intentional, without becoming too transactional, robotic, or unauthentic? And so some people are probably more in their heads than other people. Some people are more naturally relational. I had to approach this, and I used to be more of a, spreadsheet kind of guy. Like I actually, at one point, a long time ago, I had a spreadsheet with a list of my friends. Because again, I told you when we started out, I don't really understand naturally a lot of things like, how do you make friends? And so as I've grown older and as I've emulated people in my life who I see you portraying those traits in a really authentic way, I say, oh, that's how you be authentic. And so I have strived to become more authentic, not less. So what I would say is that it really comes down to, again, leaning into the direction that you want to go rather than saying, I'm going to completely cut this person out of my life. Now, I was talking to my personal trainer the other day, and he was like, no, some people are really negative and they bring me down, and I am not afraid to cut that friend out of my life. I have met many people, friends who have been in dating relationships, and the person they're dating is definitely bringing them down. And they keep going back to the person. They break up and then they go back to them. Man, there's times when you've got to cut somebody out of your life, but I wouldn't say that's being robotic necessarily. I would say that that's making a hard decision that only you can make. And I'll never tell you what to do in that situation. But sometimes you might need to look and say, I need to cut this person out. I think in most cases, you look and you say, I've got a bunch of great people in my life. I just want to think about what are my goals, and how can I align my goals, and how can I spend more time with certain people to get more of what I want and kind of move more in that direction.